goodbye spring and hello cockroach labs. And what in the world is all that? What's going on? Um, we've got a show lined up for you today. Some of you may know me, some of you may not, but I was a member of the spring team ever since 2010. In fact, um, what I like claim to, I joined back in January 2010, and the then leader at the time of the spring team was Randy McLean, and I think he told me I was the first person hired on to that department, whatever, ever since the acquisition had closed. Now there's some debates as to what the tally is on that, because when they hired me, I got in on what was called the commercial engineering team, which was sort of adjacent to the spring team. Um, Later that year, they hired some other key people you may have heard of, like it was a few months later they hired Josh Long, aka Starbucksman. You may have heard that name. If you haven't heard that name, then I don't know where you've been living. They also hired Craig Walls, the famous author of Spring in Action, well, multi revisions or multiple releases of that book, like I think the biggest selling title at Manning Publications, and Roy Clarkson. Um, so I joined a group of people. They got hired right into the spring team, and then later I got to join the spring team after them. So as to the reckoning is the when I got into the spring team. Well, it's in the long run, it's not that important, but I joined back then, and a little bit later in 2013, I had worked on several various jobs and stuff, and I went and talked to my manager at the time and said, "Can we find a more long term team to get on? Because a little bit of this is every time you jump from job to job, there's always this sort of spin up time and ramp down time when you're shifting assignments. And it's like I can do these assignments, but is there something that's more efficient to get into for a long term thing?" So he said he'd check around, and there were several options, but one of them I happened to draw a fancy to was called Spring Data, and it was at that year's Spring One conference when I got to sit down and actually meet face to face Oliver Dropbaum and sit there and chat with him for about an hour. And suffice it to say, I got hooked and pulled in to work on that team. So I joined Spring Data team back in 2013. I worked on different things with that. Spring Helios, Hypermedia is the engine of application state, the project that fundamentally help you build links, which is a core structure with any hypermedia based service. You need links or you got nothing. I also worked on things like Spring Data REST. There's other features in there. The Spring Data portfolio has like 15 different modules. Some of them are managed in house, some of them are community based, most of them are in house, but uh, they have tools over there like Spring Data JPA, Spring Data Redis, Spring Data MongoDB, Spring Data for Apache Cassandra, um, and there's other stuff out there. But I joined it's kind of a small team, and I found that very appealing because something I had worked on for like 10 years before I even came to the spring team was this contract for the federal government of the United States for their FAA, or the people who basically help steer the planes around in the skies. Was we worked on a 10-year contract selling them telecom services, and at that point in time we had a monolithic database. We had an Oracle database on that contract, and we had to write SQL queries. I was sort of the tech lead for a particular application our operations center used, 24 by 7 by 365. It was up all the time, 5 nines of availability, all that kind of stuff. And by golly, I had to learn how to write SQL select statements. We used Oracle, like I don't know, everybody did in the day, but I was learning how to write SQL statements in the trenches, and you know that was to me like a crucible of learning, because one of the other things is in any contract is you start from here, and then over time the scope increases. We were running telco services. We started with 22 sites of the customer and learned how to build services there. So essentially, we wrote queries to manage all the alarm data that was flowing into our ops center to detect outages. So we had to write correlations and this stuff for 20 sites. Take that, multiply that by the amount of gear times the number of alarms that come in every day from that network gear, and you kind of have a taste for what that is. But the 22 sites expanded and grew to like 2,000 sites, something like that. So you're about a factor increase of like 100x increase. And so queries that I had written at the beginning didn't scale. I found out 2 years later this particular query didn't work in the future. I had to go back and learn how to do explain plans. I had never even heard of that. I had this textbook in my hand, which I just recently cleaned out old textbooks, and I realized I didn't need that textbook anymore, so I threw it out. But it was a textbook on Oracle SQL. The Oracle SQL book taught you how to do select statements and joins and that kind of stuff, but it didn't teach me how to do explain plans. So I learned how to go and analyze database queries, and the thing would come back to me and say, here's what you're doing. Here's all the full table scans you're doing in these select statements. And I was like, wow, that's pretty horrible. We had this case insensitive feature where if we got an alarm in and it had a host name, we'd look it up in the database table, and we decided it didn't matter if it was uppercase or lowercase, it had to match. So we just uppered everything, and we're like, okay, that works. Let's just upper all the columns. Let's do uppers on all the comparators to do the filters. And well, gee, that generates a full table scan unless you've indexed the upper version of that column, which we had not. So it's like, wow, no wonder the thing doesn't scale when you multiply all the tables by a factor of 100 and then generate a Cartesian product. No wonder that doesn't scale. Gee. So I'd worked for 10 years writing SQL select statements in the trenches. And I was also a sort of mini manager, if you will. The company I was at, we had something called group leaders. So you had the person who gave you your assignments. That was your technical leader, the person who assigned you tasks. But then you also had the person that you reported to for annual performance reviews and that kind of thing. And at one time, I was the manager of that app, and I had to have other people help me. So I was a tech leader on that. But then they had also turned me into a group leader. So I had to manage 7 people that didn't necessarily work directly for me. And then so that was another thing I was doing. And I'd managed to hire somebody onto the team to write stuff for me that was really killing it. This particular person, new grad was, I kept giving him bigger and bigger scoped assignments, and he would kill it. He would just knock it out of the park. So I don't know, somewhere around the 8th or 9th year of having, I'd been there for the demo phase where we had pitched this thing to the customer. And then I came in and managed the app for 8 or 9 years. And I was kind of like, I think he can take it over. And I gave it to him. I let him take it. Oh, all right. Hey, Greg, good to see you from my buddy there, Maciek Wakawiak. I've had him on the show before, but you go check out his channel. He's got some great content out there. He's done a lot of spring content out there. So it's good to see you here at the chat. We've got some more greeters here. Khaled says hello to you. Now, I found this guy to take over this app, so I went and took over somebody else's app. I mean, come on, is that how it works? I went and picked up a back office business app, and I went and talked to another fellow teammate who was working on it. And this was a different set of people that use this app. This was for the back office, no 24/7 stuff. These people work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, nobody coming in on the weekends. I'd already done the bit where you come in at whatever 2 a.m. because there's an outage, or you come in at 10:30 p.m. because there's an issue, and you resolve it. So it was kind of a nice peaceful transition. Don, hey Don, good morning. Greg, good morning to you, Don. Good to see you there. So I moved to this business office app, and in the previous, I think I've talked about that in some previous episodes. I worked on this. I learned a different type of thing. I also worked on another business office app that it too is based, every app we were building on this contract in some form, more or less, was connecting into a database. So, I mean, there was no escaping SQL. And also, might I say, not everything was a Java app. So I wasn't using Hibernate everywhere. I was using other technologies. So I had to have my select statements in place. So I had to work on that. And I had found somebody else had built this business office app, and they had joined views to views, or they went out and found what they needed to find. Some of the stuff they found was in views, but I had learned that you don't join views. Views are a final result. You can write a whole bunch of selects and get join tables together, and the whole thing may be cemented into a view. To me, it then raises the question of how much value is there in the view. If you're writing multiple selects and they're all doing the same joins, okay, maybe there's value in having the view. But there's the accidental chance that someone else is going to pick up your view and join it to another table, which is a no-no because you may be rejoining the same table. So I found this business office app that you'd click the save button. It would take 20 minutes to process because of this one select statement. And it took me about, I don't know, 3 to 5 weeks to go track down what the thing actually did because it had absolutely no automated tests to it. Talked about testing a week ago, so go check the channel if you want to learn more about my opinions on testing. But suffice it to say, I went and figured out how to rewrite that select statement to operate correctly without using any views, and the query went sub-second. What's funny is that department, they were the business office. They were not the critical line of stuff. So I think they had raised the alarm on that many times, but basically they were low priority. So, they had not had support for years. So for them, they'd hit the save button and go to the coffee shop and go to the coffee break room and take a break. I came in and fixed it, and they hit the save button, and they didn't. I think the first few times they didn't realize it was done. So I think they went and took a break, and then wait, it's done. So they were clicking, and they discovered it moved faster. So all that's to tell you, for 10 years, I was writing select statements and learning how to hone that. And it's not academic. It's not like I'm studying this to write a paper. I'm reading everything I can find on select statements to write better queries, because that was my bread and butter. Was I needed to build better. I needed to get the right answer faster, so on and so forth. And I did. It was funny, that back office team, they gave me like a little paper award. I mean, not monetary or anything, but they just gave me a little certificate at one point to express their appreciation for me fixing something that, arguably should have been fixed years ago. But that's the way the cookie crumbles is in pro codering, is sometimes different teams get different priorities. So got a hi from MHDS. So hi to you. Glad to see everybody on board here. So anyway, to have left basically back then, I had read, like, every time I used Google Newsreader back in the day, and one of the technologies I followed all the time was Spring. I just thought, man, I love that Spring code. It's cool. I used it. I tinkered with it. The stuff in my day-to-day operations did not use it because it was heavily not Java based. It used something else that's now defunct. But basically, I got married and I wanted to move my family to another location across the country, closer to family. And I realized my current company wasn't located in that area, which is where we are now. So I started job hunting, and I thought, okay, if I'm looking for a new job, what's the gold? What do I want to go for above all else? Spring. Why not? Why not take a shot at it? It may not work out. So I'd heard there was this thing called the Spring Experience going on down in South Florida, and I happened to be in Central Florida. It was about a 3-hour drive from where we were. So I had a certain buddy of mine that I'd actually interacted with previously. His name is Russ Miles, who's been on the channel before. So a lot of people know him. And I chatted with him, and he had made a deal where if I could get down there, he would put me on the speaker circuit to actually talk about Spring Python. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of Spring Python, but basically, one way or the other, I wanted to get down to that conference. I went to my own manager at my old company and said, hey, could I go down to this conference? They happened to, by coincidence or maybe divine providence, had said, what's something we can do to expand your career? What's something we can, I think they were trying to say, we'd like to help you, but we can't just hand you more money. So what's something else we can do for you? And I said, well, there's this conference in South Florida I would love to go to. And, I don't even need to fly. If I could just get a company rental car, that would be great. And they said, oh, that sounds perfect. And so they gave me a rental car. And so my wife and I drove down. We went down together. We're like, let's make a trip out of this. And so I went down there, and I made a point to greet every single member of the Spring team when I was there. I even ran into Adrian Collier, who is the former CTO of SpringSource at the time. I got on an elevator car, and he was there. So I overcame my introverted nature, just put my hand out there, and he goes, oh, wait, you're the Spring Python guy, aren't you? I didn't know what to make of that, but I said, yeah. anyway, the key person to meet was Keith Donald. He's one of the founders, I think, of one of the five founders that originally had launched the company. And he was also in Central Florida because at one point in time he had worked at Harris Corporation as well. So I managed to greet him, and I was like, I had brought a resume. I was ready to hand him a resume, and he said, "Let's meet in my office next week." And his office is half a mile down the road from where my office at Harris was. But anyway, suffice it to say, I got to meet him, turn in a resume, and it was an entire year before they called me back because they were in the middle of a hiring freeze. But they called me back. We went through the whole process, and I got onto the team. I got onto the team. Um, and then, it after a bit, I call it floundering because I was trying to find where I fit best on the team. But I ended up on the Spring Data team in 2013, and then worked there for the next 10 years. So all this is to say, I've worked in data persistence like almost my entire career. I've done some form of talking with databases, and it's become one of my firm beliefs that it's like, except for very specific apps, it's almost like what app can you run into that does not have data of some form? Now you can talk about like gateways, for example. You may have a gateway to where everything comes in through that may not have any data, for example, but I wouldn't call that the focal point of your system. That's to let you into the main app that talks to data. I was talking back in September to a bunch of students at Austin Peay's computer science and engineering program, and I mentioned, to me, the biggies that just about any app is going to have is it's a web. Now you could say UI, but web is the thing to do. Everyone's doing that except in very specific situations. Like maybe those console apps, like if you go to Best Buy or any retail shop, those thick lines that they use to check you out may not be web based, and today we have iOS or Android apps, but that's almost a secondary technology. The primary technology is web based. So one thing that you can always go get a job for is go learn how to build web pages. But I told the students at Austin Peay, I said, you can build web pages. I don't want to say that's easy, but I'm like, it's not hard. It's you can learn that. And here's the thing: a lot of other people are learning it too. It's competitive. You need to learn it and get good at that. It's a competitive field, but they also need a lot of people. So there's a lot of opportunity there as well. It's not like there's little opportunity. You can go for that. You need web. So I could say web is the first thing. The second thing is security. No app is real until it's secured, especially in this day and age. You can go read the Cuckoo's was it Cuckoo Egg or Cuckoo Nest, whatever. It's a book written by a math professor from Berkeley, and this is back in the 70s when there was zero security in computer stuff. And this guy who happened to work on their computer systems noticed a 2 cent discrepancy between two different systems that was supposed to be the same. And so he went digging for the bug and uncovered a hacker ring and stuff like this. And it's really a good book to go read. But back then there was no security. Today, security is mandatory. So you can go into, so every app needs to have security, but if you want to do security, there is a lot you need to go study to get up to ground level, just to get the basics. There's certifications. I feel like I know a lot about security, but anytime I start talking to somebody who does it every day, I realize I'm woefully underskilled in that. So there's just a lot to study. So you can do it, but it's a big time sink. So just factor that into your analysis of, do I want to become a security engineering expert, that kind of person? So you need web, you need security, and to me, the big third one that just about every app needs is data. Do you know how to store data in a database? Do you know how to access data in a database? Do you know how to get to it, put it there, mold it, shape it? We've seen a lot of formations of data, changes, alterations, but something that's been around for, it has to be now 50 years, is relational data. I went to school in the early 90s, and the textbook I was using had been published in the late 80s. So, I mean, we're already getting into ancient territory, but I think the paper on tables and correlations and stuff that I think Spencer Kimball was making reference to was somewhere back in the 70s, the idea of relational databases. And so we've had relational data for decades. Now, we started running into issues with relational data as apps scale to bigger and bigger and global international heights. But there's something to me about SQL, structured query language, that I can see engineers using it to interact with data, and at the same time, I can see business analysts that don't have computer science training. These are people that for whom spreadsheets are not enough. These people can drive spreadsheets with pivot tables, but they reach for Microsoft Access because that's the dream tool of every business analyst. Why? Because they can actually write select statements. Some of them, they get as far as they can with the drag and drop, and they realize, wait a minute, there's a little bit more if I go study this little thing called SQL. And by golly, it's not complicated. SQL, you can do a lot of stuff with that. You can get very far knowing SQL, knowing minimal amounts of SQL, and it's kind of astounding. So the big three I talk about is web, security, and data. So being able to know SQL is like amazing. Now, there's other stuff we can talk. Like the fourth one, I would say, if there's a fourth rung to put on that list I just made, it would be messaging, because we use a lot of messaging tools. We have RabbitMQ, JMS, Apache Kafka, and the list goes on. These each tackle different problems and offer solutions, but I personally can't honestly think of an app that has messaging that doesn't have data. So, so to me, it's like, what are you best at? You may have the knack for web stuff, and so I'm like, go get it, go after that. Or you may have a natural flair for security. I had a coworker back when I was on the commercial engineering days who he could really think of scenarios I could not about. Well, your app's vulnerable in this context, and then that. What if you get up and walk away from your machine? How do you protect that? How's the app protect you from a coworker walking over and either being malicious or playing a prank through the system? Does it secure against that? And I was like, I didn't think of that. So there's a certain mindset to be had to be a security expert. But anyway, I've worked with data, my whole career, and I somehow accidentally became very good at it. I don't want to say accidentally. I invested time in it, but it's one of those things where it's not a big jump to it. It's just lots of little steps. And over time, I accumulated an awareness of persistence. What are the trade-offs? What works and doesn't work when we're talking about relational data? And then I had a kind of a surprising thing happen back in November, at the end of November. I'd actually finished working on a pull request for Spring Data JPA back in is 2021. I want to say they made me the lead for Spring Data JPA. They needed to put a specific person on. They had, at that point in time, they had two different people covering it, and in my opinion, the consequence of that was it didn't get enough attention. You needed one person on top of the project, and so they put me there. I knew relational data. I was very good at SQL. My Hibernate JPA skills were a little lacking. So if I could catch up on that, okay, no problem. So I took that over as the lead developer for that. And we got notice that there was an acquisition coming for VMware. There was a company out there that was interested in purchasing VMware called Broadcom. And then I'll go through all the regulatory phases and stuff. Suffice it to say, at the end of November, I had just finished a pull request making a sort of monumental change to the core fabric of Spring Data JPA that I was wanting to get feedback on. And I turned it over for final review. I had concluded a triage meeting with the team where we went over weekly issues. I hung up from the meeting. I checked my email, and I had noticed that they were not going to continue my position. There's decisions. There's a new company comes in, they have to make decisions on what they're going to do. I'm not going to pretend that I know all the reasoning or the choice, why they made various choices, but suffice it to say, this was my notice that I wasn't going to be a Spring developer anymore, or at least a member of the Spring team anymore. And that was a big shock. That's one of the biggest shocks I've ever felt, at least in my career. A job, I've had other personal things happen, but that one was kind of stunning. I walked downstairs after I read that email, and my wife said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No." that was a stunning event for me. That was very emotional because I felt I had put a lot into that. Um, actually, I actually went and just got in my car and went for a drive. I needed to go and just start processing that. And I went over to a friend of mine's house and we sit there and talked for about an hour. But and I started thinking, what's next? I don't know what's next. I don't, I wasn't sure right then, but I told myself was, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm going to let myself be sad. I'm going to let myself, essentially what I felt was I was grieving a challenging thing. This is something, this was going to be a new chapter in my career. And what was it going to be? Where were we going to go next? What was I going to do for my family? I didn't have a fear of, like, oh, I don't have any money to pay for the house or anything like that. I actually happened to have some savings set aside. So I didn't worry about that. It was just more of a, what am I supposed to do next? I don't know what my calling is. And that was a tough one. But I also realized we were going into December. December's the Christmas season. And I figured, if I'm going to go talk to recruiters or anybody that's hiring, they're probably not going to be totally focused in the season. These people are probably thinking, okay, let me finish this interview and then I'm going to go home and decorate the Christmas tree or something like that. And so it's like, I don't want to be at the bottom of somebody's list in that context. So I said, I'm not going to worry about interviewing for new positions until January. I'm just going to take it easy. I'm going to relax. I'm going to sit there and invest time in my family. I'm married. I have 3 kids, wonderful kids. The funny thing is I brought them all spring socks from the Spring One conference back in September. But anyway, I loved it when they put them on. So yeah, Patrick sits there and says, take a break. I don't know if he's suggesting I take a break or he says that's a thing to always do. And I said, yes, it's always okay to take a break. Demi Lotta says, so sorry to hear this, Greg. I appreciate that. So I was like, I'm one of the things I had not done in a long time was clean out the garage. So I said, this is good. I need to go expend the energy. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go start organizing the garage. And if that was a good way to spend the energy. And it's also kind of like playing 3D Tetris. It's like you're sitting there moving boxes around and okay, I don't need this anymore. And so I started doing stuff and, spending time with the kids and all and enjoying that. And, I shared that on Twitter. I'd put a post out on Twitter saying this is my last day, because essentially what they told me was you're on paid leave for 60 days at the end of November, but you're effectively off the team. And in 48 hours, they cut my access to email and Slack, which is understandable. So that's how it goes. I've seen people get cut from jobs and have their access revoked within the hour. I at least had a chance to connect in and have a Zoom chat with my fellow teammates before that was revoked. But I posted the notice like the next day on Twitter, and y'all's response was, I mean, it put me to tears. I cried at the reaction. That was incredible. Just sometimes I've felt, I've never been on stage as a keynote speaker. I'm not the person that goes to 300 events a year, that kind of thing. I just been working quietly. To see this many people just reach out was incredible. It was very moving. And Don says, I know how you felt. I had a similar situation. And what I've seen on places like Reddit and stuff is I think a lot of people are getting rocked in the tech sector. There's the layoffs you hear about in the news. You'll hear about the Microsofts or the Facebooks or whatever that are having layoffs, but there's a lot of smaller shops that don't make the headlines that are nevertheless getting rocked by all that. But it was somewhere, I think it was in late December something, that Josh Long had DM'd me that he'd spotted this potential opportunity, and he was like, do you want me to introduce you to this guy? And I'm like, who is this? And it was an outfit called Cockroach Labs. And my first response to Josh was, is this where I tell you that cockroaches really disgust me, that I saw them growing up, and I would leap in horror at their presence. At the same time, you had to be able to hit. You had to, if they're in the house, you had to hit them in one whack, or they got away. So I learned. I built up reflexes to take out a cockroach fast. So I said, well, I said to myself, it's like, well, that'd be ridiculous to pass up any opportunity. So I said, sure. And he introduced us through DMing. That's when I found out you can DM more than one person in a thread, if you will. So I chatted with somebody. It was a chat. It wasn't an interview. It was sort of a get like a meeting. And so we got online there, and I went and chatted with somebody named Doug Weatherby. And I'd found out this is somebody who'd worked at Red Hat way long ago. Sorry, Doug. You worked at IBM and had also worked at Lightbend. And it seemed as if instantly we were talking in shorthand. We were jumping to somebody who'd worked with Scala, had a lot of familiarity with JVM, had worked in persistence, had also had, no junior developer by any means. He had a lot of awareness of the industry as well. There's a lot of stuff going around on Twitter and whatnot, or call it X, but about how engineering is just not about code. It's there's more people stuff than coding stuff in engineering. And I can see the point of that. And this is somebody that had a lot of awareness of that stuff. And I found it for a meeting that was like going to be 30 to 45 minutes. We talked for like an hour and 15 minutes. And part of it was like, this is my chance. I need to share some of my stories. I put out a video recently about how to interview in amidst a slump economy. And it's like, I need to make a point of sharing some of the stories of what I've dealt with. And at the same time, I'm listening to what he's saying. By the time I hung up that call, I was like, I did not know that about CockroachDB. I didn't know that that's what that did. I'd had their logo on a slide at my presentation back in September at SpringOne, but I really didn't know anything about the technology. And when I hung it up, I said, that technology is cool. And I went and shared that with my wife, and she kind of raised her eyebrows at that, like, I kept waiting to hear from other people. Were people going to reach out to me? Was I going to have to start scrimping and reaching out to other people, or what was going to be the story on that? There's really not much more in December, but in January, it's like, okay, time to polish up the resume, start putting it out to some people maybe I had connections with, or I chatted with some friends that I knew that used to be on the Spring team that had since left and gone to other shops. I Zoomed with different people, just partly just to check in and partly to commiserate. But I actually, I chatted with other people that might be potentially offering me a position, and amazingly, nobody else was yet quite coming back with an offer, but I went and pursued this one. I said, what this could be something new. What I went and dug in and found out about was CockroachDB was a data store, and it's based on SQL. Well, golly gee, I know SQL. I've sit there and written in the trenches queries for 10 years. I've worked with the relational databases for another 10 years on top of that, helping other people in framework code. But theirs is called distributed SQL, because what CockroachDB is, you run multiple nodes. You can run as many nodes as you like. You can have a set of nodes that are in the US Eastern region. You can have a set of nodes running the US Western region, and it automatically replicates according to a specific protocol. You always run an odd number so that you have a quorum that can vote. So a node goes down, the rest of them can say, you take over, and it shifts. And it's what's astounding to me is it's there to uphold all the ACID properties that databases have. And the more I dug into it, I was like, this is kind of nifty stuff. And it's like the SQL of old. I think a lot of people liked SQL because it was, I want to say simple. I mean, SQL is simple. It's not. Somebody I worked with years ago at Harris said it's not rocket science, and it's not. It's like it's the first DSL that was out there, a DSL for data. And this was doing it. And I suddenly had this revelation that it's like, why did people leave SQL? Why did people leave monolithic databases? Because they needed cloud scale databases, and a monolithic database couldn't provide that. A jumbo server, in your data center can't field requests both from San Francisco and from London. Either if you put the server in San Francisco, London is going to suffer from that, or you're having to jury rig stuff where you're like, well, we'll have a copy of the data sitting over in London, but if you want to do any writes, they have to go all the way back to San Francisco, that kind of stuff. And a lot of the reasons people were, in my opinion, were jumping. A lot of the reason people were jumping into NoSQL stores is because they needed a relaxation on that. They needed an easing on those restrictions, and so they started going there. And in a lot of these NoSQL data stores, you didn't have things like transactions, or at least not at first. And so people were struggling with how to do that. You know, well, we need the scalability factor, but now we need to cope with the fact that we don't have all the ACID properties maybe we're used to. And so we started, people were learning the patterns and anti-patterns of all that. And that's why I'm kind of intrigued at, well, is Cockroach DB bringing SQL into the 21st century? Is this the avenue where it can handle that kind of stuff and put you back into everybody's favorite DSL for data? So I chatted more with Doug and the people there, and fundamentally what they're offering me is or what they were offering me was a position to be essentially a trainer. Now, what did that mean? What's it? What does this mean? Does this mean I got to go on site and deliver slideshows or something? I said, no. Because I'd expressed that, I got a family. It's, whenever I travel, it puts stress on my spouse to go manage the kids and stuff. And so I'm the kind of person who likes to travel the least amount. I mean, I like to get together once a year, twice a year. Just, oh no, you don't. We got other people that'll go on site. We need somebody to create the content. Great. Wait. Create content. What have I been doing for the past 4 years? I've been making content. We need somebody who can build training stuff. They'd already made something with the training videos with Cockroach called Cockroach University. So they'd made a round of that. It was they made a batch of content about 2 years ago to serve a particular need, and then as more shops picked up and used it, they got feedback on, okay, here's where the content needs to go to. We need somebody that can help design the content, basically somebody who can pick up a database, this database, and show how to use it, teach other people how to use it. So you need to use the technology and then explain it to somebody else. And something I had learned, I used to study martial arts, Taekwondo, and one of the fastest ways to learn it yourself is to teach it to somebody else. And that was like something I kind of learned with making YouTube content, with making videos and stuff, was put it to use, try to explain it to somebody else. And I thought, wait a minute, okay, SQL, check. Create content, check. And also that we could do it remotely, maintain, I didn't need to move somewhere like I talked to a buddy of mine that I knew in college who had moved a couple times, and I noticed he had moved to Apple. He had joined Apple like a couple of years ago, and I chatted with him through LinkedIn and found out he works on Final Cut Pro. And I thought, oh, that's wicked. I use Final Cut Pro. Does that mean I can message him with all my requests? Maybe not. But thanks, Butchak. He says, Butchak, you're a great fit, Greg. I appreciate that. So they're like, okay, we need somebody. And here's the other problem is Cockroach Labs is kind of, well, I don't know, small compared to maybe the mega shops like Microsoft, like 300 people or something. But some of the biggest companies are wanting to use Cockroach DB because of the properties I've kind of hinted at. So there's big shops that are wanting to use it. And I kind of was like, oh, like what's a big shop, like, 300 developers or something? Is that? No, one particular company I'm not going to mention has 40,000 software engineers. And my jaw dropped when I heard that. I'm like, wait, one shop? One of many shops that happens to have like 40,000 developers. So they need something that's scalable. They need training, they need content that's scalable. And it has to be sustainable. We can't sit there and get caught up in little bitty stuff. We need systems. We need pipelines of management. We need to make a change here, roll out, update the decks. Let's see what else do we need in updating video content. And I was like, wait a minute. Okay. SQL check. making content, check. And then I thought, well, pipelines. I manage the Spring Data CI pipelines. That's a team with 15 modules. I maintained all the CI pipelines for years. And I thought, this is perfect. This is the one thing that's different from anything I've done before is I'm not going to, in this position, I wouldn't be building Cockroach DB, and I wouldn't be going on site and consulting to help people build the apps directly. Instead, I'm just going to teach them how this tool works. I'm going to teach them how it operates. And I thought, if I let go of my habits and assumptions of building the code directly and instead look at what have I learned, I've learned how to write SQL. I've learned what nasty SQL is and what good stuff is and how to go figure that out. And so I said, I can do that. I can do that. And so I reached out and said, can we do an interview? Let's start the process. Let's do it. And here we are today. I went through and did the interview process, and I felt like anytime I was chatting with the people that were that were interviewing me or the recruiter and stuff, I felt like we could quickly talk in shorthand, and it's been exciting. And I started last week. On Tuesday, on the 20th. That was my first day as Cockroach Labs. And yes, I'm wearing my nicely branded ProCoder stuff here, but I've already asked them, you guys got any merchandise? Because I need some shirts with Cockroach on it. And so I joined Cockroach Labs as a senior staff technical content engineer. So there's still a lot of discovery. I'm going to have to find out what this job is about. I'm going to have to, I know the 10,000 foot level, but with any job, there's nuance and subtleties and stuff like that. And I'm looking forward to finding out what this is. And I'm actually excited to do this because this is something that I can do, something I feel like I've had all these opportunities throughout my career to learn the skill set. And the irony is this was, to me, the only opportunity laid in my lap. And this is where, some people can call this coincidence. And, I don't know if you're a person of faith or not, but I am. I am a person of faith. And to me, the only way this happened to me, the only way that I would have found this position has to be divine providence. So that's just my opinion on it. So Demalade, I hope I'm saying that right, says congratulations. I appreciate that. Now I do have some questions here. And so just a question out of curiosity, as a framework developer, did you deep dive into the technology or protocols and then go to the ideation on how to do it? How do you handle deadlines and also maintain code? So one of the big differences between building framework code like Spring stuff versus building apps, when you're building apps, it's like, I'm building this app for you. I can typically go to one person or a team of people and say, this is for you. When you do framework code, it's for all of you. And you can imagine I'm building this for 1,000 people or 10,000 or 1,000,000 people. And a lot of stuff with framework technology, you have to look at this trade-off. Well, you're asking for this one feature. If I add the one feature, is it only going to serve you? How much is going to serve everybody? And what's the maintenance of this feature? So because once I've adopted this feature that I add to the framework, there's maintenance with it. How much is the maintenance versus how much is the payoff for the whole community? And that's the kind of analysis that you do compared to building an app. If you're building an app for 400 people, then that's different than for 4 million people. And that's one of these kind of trade-offs that you do. Did you deep dive into the technology or protocols? Well, yeah, at certain points, I went and read the JPA spec. I went and built a parser, an Antler parser, so that we could manipulate JPA queries to add order by clauses or etc. So we can implement paging support with our API. So I had to go read the JPA spec for that and turn that into something. Okay. Hibernate did not have a spec. Their Hibernate query language is a superset of JPA query language. So I had to go read all their examples. So I turn all their examples into test cases, that kind of thing. And sometimes you start from there and you reach the idea, or sometimes it starts with an idea and then you work your way back and it has to fit in with the protocols, that kind of stuff. So it's like that. And sometimes there are deadlines. Some of the deadlines in framework code is we need to get this out. We need to get this into the next release. The deadlines are different when you're working for a specific customer. The customer may need this feature. And so that's when that deadline is. So And a lot of times it's just sorting out which is the most important feature first. Prioritize stuff. We need to do this first and then this. And sometimes it has to be released on this date. So whatever you can get in under the wire passes. And sometimes the customer's willing to push out a date. It depends on what the contract reads. So there's a lot of stuff there. Ken here is curious about the daily work of Spring Team members. Besides looking at GitHub issues, fix bugs, and new features, do your guys work for third-party companies as a consult? Well, I cannot continue to speak for the Spring Team. I can say what we did back then, and it's fundamentally we have to build the toolkits and the frameworks and the portfolio projects to sustain. Part of it is we have to listen to community feedback. We have to ingest that and decide what's the best feature we can have to put out there. So we get a lot of input saying we like this, we like that, and we're having to digest it and put it through that lens of what I just talked about value versus maintenance cost. So it's more than just GitHub issues. We also have to, we have to fix bugs. Who doesn't? But do you work for third-party companies as a console? We very much definitely, like in the days of Pivotal Software, we had a division that would do consulting. The Spring Team, the people that build the portfolio projects were not necessarily going on site and doing consulting work and building apps for people, but there was also a commercial branch of the Spring Team. So these were people that would go and work on specific commercial grade features for customers, or they would work under the guise, okay, this is a module that we're going to sell, so it does have some of that same framework analysis. But there's also there's what's called, like, you can call them like sales engineers. There's people that their job is to go out, and it's called pre-sales. So you meet with people. So there was a batch of people on the Spring Team that would go out to meet with potential clients and to talk about, what do you need? The idea is, let's scope out what your solution would be based on which various products you're using. And this isn't just the Spring Team. This is any team. And then you have what's called post-sales. So you also have customers that have bought your products and they want continued consultation on how best to solve their problems using your products, because you want to invest in that because you want these people to re-up their contracts in a year and buy support. So there's definitely commercial aspects. The suffice it to say, where I worked on the Spring Data team, I didn't work directly with them. I worked on portfolio projects, but that was definitely a part of the thing. Now, Don, I had questions posted. By the way, smash like if you're getting value out of today's episode of the Pro Coder Show. But there's also Don here. Don, who's chimed in a couple of times, is one of our members. And by the way, if you're interested in becoming a member, you want to go check out member.procoder.io. And he had asked he posted some questions at procoder.io/question. And he said, what are you going to be doing in your new position? Is it similar to your spring position? So hopefully I answered that one. To me, in a sense, it's very different from what I was doing. So I'm not maintaining the software anymore, but I'm going to be working in new types of software. So we're going to be talking about, we need examples and demonstrative ways to use the stuff. How did you find your new position? I kind of shared that, my personal story on how I found that. Now, what aspects of your previous position do you feel help obtain your new job, if any? Well, one of the skills that I had back in the days of Harris Corporation is I was hired at what's called L2 level. Instead of L1, I went to L2 because at the time I had finished grad school and they happened to give me sort of an instant promotion. But when I got promoted to L3 after 5 years, they told me part of your performance review is going to be based upon interviewing other people. So I went and dived into that head first, and I went and interviewed a lot of people. And so I learned about the interviewing process, and it's something that I captured in the video that I released last week. If you go check out the YouTube channel, you can find that. But I feel that the skills I learned in how to interview helped me myself interview, both to get onto the Spring Team as well as to this position, which is you need more than say, hey, I know React.js, because what if they're not looking for React? What if they're looking for another JS thing? So nothing is as simple as I know React.js or I know Spring Boot. They want a little more than that. When you're interviewing for stuff, they want examples like, well, this is the problem that came to me. This is what I came up with as a solution. Here's where it worked. Here's where it wasn't quite what they needed, and I made these adjustments. And so this kind of stuff I felt like I sort of knew how to interview. It's not a shortcut or a hack. It's instead, I know what interviewers need. They need problem solving examples, because that's what we're doing, is we're solving problems for people, and that's what they look for. So, a lot of this is I've been active on Reddit channel. Amazingly, Reddit, which apparently is going to go IPO soon, there's a lot of, I don't know, burning subreddits out there, but also I can find discussions of value, where I can pick a thread of conversation and get into it. And I shared with somebody else that said they got laid off. They didn't know what to do with it. And I said, it's okay to just sit there and be sad. It's okay to sit there and grieve. There is a grieving process to this. Doesn't mean you're not going to go out and try to find something new. Doesn't mean any of that, but it's okay to feel that, And so I've tried to do a little bit of my own. Let me contribute back to other people. Let me contribute to others that are having some of this, because I know a lot of people, it's tough. What do we got here? It all depends on Glenn. I don't know that. I was happy to meet you at Spring One, and also have your signed book. Are you still going to give talks on conferences? Well, I appreciate that. I have to see what the future is. Apparently, Cockroach Labs has an annual event called the Roachathon. Okay, they lean into that. And why is it called Cockroach DB? Because it's the database you just can't kill. Okay. Are you still going to give talks at conferences? I don't know. That part's a little open. I'm going to extend your question, though, to say, are you going to keep writing books? And the answer to that is absolutely. I'm not writing more spring books. Where is it? Oh, here it is. So there is a book, of which is the sponsor of today's episode of the Pro Coder Show, and it's called 12 Rules for Pro Coders. Go to 12rules.io and check it out if you want to find out what this book is about. But basically, there's more to coding. There's more to being a pro coder than just coding. It's not just a bunch of if-then statements or class definitions or function calls. There's more stuff in there, and it's taken me 27 years. I don't want to say to learn it all, but to learn many of these lessons. And if you grab this book, it can shortcut your process of learning these things. Okay. So I did it the slow, hard way, and I want you to do it the fast, efficient way. And right now this book is in the hands of my editor, and I'm hoping by the end of the month to have it out. So that's why if you go there, it's massively discounted. You can go ahead and pre-order the ebook, the audio book, and I'm even going to have a video version of it. So check that out. It's super steeply discounted to grab it while it's hot, because the price is not going to be there much longer. Let me put that down. Let's see. I appreciate we've had a stream of comments come in. Just checking them out. So, and one thing, that I have really appreciated is just the amount of support that I've felt through the community. That's been fantastic. But one thing that I really enjoy is that Cockroach Labs has indicated they're eager for me to I can keep making this content. Now, as you can tell, I've pivoted away from spring content. Instead, I just want to help you with general wisdom and advice on how to become a pro coder. And so, one of my mantras, if you go to store.procoder.io, you can get this, which is what I call the pro coder mantra, to be professional. And so I want to encourage all of you to go out there and be professional.
This episode is over, but your code writing journey continues. Visit procoder.io to find links and resources to help you become a pro coder.